The game is not political in any way and never will be. It is historical fiction. Fiction. The existence of indigenous people and their genocide, like, you don't get to do an apolitical version of that. Why would you take this project on? Did you just like the aesthetics? Were you, like, did you just see, like, you know, historical documentation showing what Aztecs looked like and be like, oh, neat. Yeah, wonder what was going on there. We make that into a title and we'll see how that goes. Okay, a couple days ago, I showed you all a video game, and this was a video game where, on first glance, it doesn't look like the most advanced of gameplay. I mean, right now, games and gamers, I mean, you just got your cup running full, but it did have a neat premise, and that was that you were going to play as an indigenous person who is trying to destroy and kill colonizers, Spanish colonizers, the conquistadors. That was the whole idea of it. I'm using IGX player, but yeah, I too see the buffering. I wanted to ignore it, but it just became too buffery. And you've already seen the trailer, I think. All of you have. Now, I didn't know a lot of the details for this game, like the team behind it. Are they consulting indigenous historians? Are there indigenous people working on the title itself? Because there's a lot of ways you can respectively talk about historical events. Look at the movie, and it still can be very successful. Look at Prey. Like that was a film in which they did all the right moves. They hired on like, I think every single indigenous person in the movie is an indigenous actor. They hired indigenous consultants. They hired an indigenous producer. They were both financially and historically reaching out. And like, I think that's the right way to do that for a project. This trailer comes out and the Nazis lost their fucking minds. Like, they started flooding it with downvotes, just being like, what? Oh, is this the murder white people video game? And all this kind of stuff. It's not historically accurate. It's a ahistorical video game that does talk about real people and topics that did actually happen, but it's all fictionalized. It's all fictionalized characters, blah, blah, blah. The only reason you should be offended by this is if you want to be a white supremacist. Like, sure, if you're a white supremacist, the idea of having white supremacists, Spanish conquistadors, getting killed would upset you, right? Then you'd be like, well, what the... Like, when you play the video games that, like, the majority of early shooters, and even some of them now, that are all centered in World War II, it's one of the most, like, I would say probably the most common historical era, you kill Nazis. And, like, there were people who got upset about that. But I was like, you only get upset about that if you're a Nazi. If you're a Nazi, then yeah, watching that game is probably kind of upsetting because you're just watching a whole bunch of Nazis get their heads blown open. So this got a little worse, unfortunately. Spanish fascists stole the game publisher's domain. The domain currently features image linked to far-right movements in Spain and South America, as well as a link to the page that includes a 4chan-esque meme promoting Spanish white nationalism. Last week, IGN featured a game called Aztec, in which you play an Aztec warrior going full guerrilla warfare on Spanish conquistadors. In the wake of the IGN profile, Ecumene's Aztec developers have been harassed by far-right extremists, including having the website associated with the publisher stolen by a far-right troll, who then made it into a page promoting Spanish imperialism. In the initial write-up for the game, IGN named Gamescraft as Ecumene Aztec's developer and publisher. Giantscraft is also listed as the publisher on the press materials for the game that The Verge has obtained. There are no links to Giantcraft's site on IGN's article, but searching for Giantcraft reveals a single Instagram page. On this Instagram page, Ecumene Aztec does not appear. Instead, the page features a link to a website, giantcraft.com. Upon visiting the website, users are greeted with an extremely bare-bones site for a game publisher, featuring a quote attributed to Hernan Cortez, one of the conquistadors responsible for the destruction of the Toltelian and the enslavement of its people, as well as a giant image of the cross of Burgundy, heralded by Spanish royalists to far-right South American extremists and Nazis. And it featured on this page a link to another Instagram page that is very kindly a kind of anti-woke 4chan-esque account filled with memes celebrating Spanish imperialism. To be clear, Giantscraft does not appear to be affiliated with the Spanish far right. A translation of the post on the fascist Instagram page suggests that Giantscraft did not reserve the domain giantscraft.com, and even after the reveal of Aztec, the opportunist swiped the domain and set up what is essentially a Spanish imperialist fan page. The Verge reached out to Giantscraft and its PR, and a PR spokesperson confirmed by email, writing, "Since this announcement, they have been under assault from hard right groups, and that domain was taken down." But it's not all good. On social media, Ecumene Aztec received a mixed response. Some praised the overall concept of the game. After all, there are very few games in which conquered people get the opportunity to fight back against their historical oppressors, while others derided the game's stereotypical take on Aztec civilization, featuring an ahistorical depiction of the Tenochtitlan and the human sacrifice built into the game's mechanics. Another subset of detractors were upset that you couldn't play as the Spanish. The criticism of the game seemed enough to prompt the developers to update its scope, aka you can now side with the colonizers. You can be team colonize if you want. You still, I believe, play as an Aztec character, but it's one in which you align yourself with the colonizers. The developers wrote that they would rework the game to allow players to choose to work with the conquistadors, as well as implement additional features to make the game more historically accurate. In a statement through its PR, the developers of Ecumene Aztec said change in scope was due to asks from the community. It was not planned. However, when we saw about 40% of the audience says that they would like to have the choice to join the conquistadors, so we might actually try to give them this possibility. Why did you do any of this in the first place? Like, I'm totally serious. If you, like, you can't do this whole thing ahistorically and be like, it's not political, though. Like, they actually say that. The game is not political in any way and never will be. It is historical fiction. Fiction. The existence of indigenous people and their genocide, like, you don't get to do an apolitical version of that. Why would you take this project on? Did you just like the aesthetics? Were you, like, did you just see, like, you know, historical documentation showing what Aztecs looked like and be like, oh, neat. Yeah. Wonder what was going on there. You can make that into a title and we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Let's face it, gamers who play death games are fucked up in the head. I have nothing wrong with video games, not even violent ones. In fact, I too play violent video games. I enjoy my Mortal Kombats, and I'm looking for the next one. I enjoy my Wolfenstein, you know, and I enjoy shooting Nazis in the Wolfenstein video game. I don't believe, and I think science completely backs me up on this one, that violent video games increase real-world violence. I think they do have more of a pacifying effect. And that's not to say that there isn't a whole bunch of addictive properties and problems you can get from playing video games. Absolutely true. Fair. You know, I got you. But if I'm being honest, I got no problem with the idea of this if it was done right in the first place. Like, if you would, A, consult indigenous historians, B, hire indigenous people so it doesn't look like you're simply exploiting them and profiting off them and their genocide, by the way. Like, how did you think this was going to go down? Did you think at a certain point someone was going to be like, oh, wait, this is political. Yeah, no, I know we all said it's not, but it actually, yeah, it is political. For an indigenous person, just existing is political. They don't get the ability to just turn off the white supremacy, you know, and then be like, all right, well, I've had my white supremacy for the day, so just go on, you know. They did studies on the increases in violence from, no, you're like, I'm sorry, you're dead wrong on this one. It's very well documented. It's been exceptionally well proven time and time again. I'll try to find, let's see. I made a documentary on Gamergate because I thought there was a big problem where people didn't know enough about it. You could say it was the politicians who embraced this new cult-like approval of their strongman, or perhaps even the president himself cheering them on. But what really lies at the core of all this? After the shooting in Columbine, both parents and politicians began to scramble to determine what could have caused such an atrocity.
Would enjoy blowing your opponent's head off is a problem.
I bought this game because it contains the blood and violence that was represented in the arcade version.
And violent video games became the focus. Titles like Night Trap and Doom and Mortal Kombat were seen as so grotesque that they were actually infecting children's minds, when actual studies and research revealed something completely different.
My personal sense, having spent countless hours mowing down aliens, monsters, sometimes even literal Nazis in various games, is that video games themselves, even action or violent ones, don't radicalize a person or cause them to become violent or aggressive. But one of the core lessons from psychology is that sometimes our gut instinct can be wrong. So, what does the literature say? I couldn't find anything, published literature-wise, linking video games to extremism, radicalization, or other things of that nature. Now, me not finding it doesn't mean it's not there. But given the ongoing moral panic about video games that's practically as old as I am, and the abundance of studies arguing for a link between violent or action video games and aggression, I would have expected to have at least stumbled across a mention of it if it were there. What I did find was an examination of US youth violence and general homicide rates compared against movies and video games. And there was a stretch of time in the mid-20th century where there was a small-ish correlation between movie violence and homicide rates.
Boomy Brew watched this talk on stream a few weeks ago. What? No way! Aw, Boomy's so wholesome.
But eventually that reversed. And for violent video games, there's a negative correlation between youth violence rates and video games and video game releases, especially violent ones, where you see a release and there is a decrease in youth violence. So if anything, it seems that violent media is actually reducing real-world harm, not increasing it.
There you have it. There you have it, everyone. That's what the science says. Oh, I'm no longer downvoted out of the sun. So when I put this out, obviously the gamers, like the bad gamers, because there's good gamers. I'm a good gamer, but there's bad gamers, fashy gamers. They all really lost their shit and they like just downvoted it to like fucking hell. I was like, well, I knew this would happen, but I'm glad to see that it's come out on top. Well done, internets. If you want to watch the whole documentary, here it is. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you kindly to our Lord and Saviors Peyton L. Just and Xander Corvus. Without you, we are nothing. And now, a shout out to our Knights of the Square Table. Amazing Flesh, Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, DM Rivera, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hegbard Celine, Izzy Solidarity, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Nettle, Omni, Peanut Butter Blonde, Political Papi, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Kubi, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Dimmel, Thomas, Trevbot EXE, Lucidry, Words Greenwood, Cheryl Alvarez, Tony Perkins, Thomas, O'Pecker, Travis McClinton, and Victoria Bell. Thank you so much. And a huge shout out to all the other people who make this entire show possible. Without you, it would not exist. If you can support us, please go to patreon.com/theserfs, and even $1 can help unlock all of the little goodies and help make this show entirely possible.